Go live. You ready?
Yep.
Yeah, so apparently it starts recording right when we do the go live for the OBS streaming.
Yeah, as soon as it says you're live. So, welcome to SYMF Yeshua Messianic Fellowship. This is our continuing study in the book of Galatians. Still in chapter 1. This is Galatians 1D. So, we've kind of gotten things pieced back together, and we are trying to. Wow, it's
delaying.
There's about a 30-second delay, so that beats what it was before. So, so when we get everybody in, now we can.
Try to pop out the chat.
What's that?
Pop out the chat.
What are you gonna need to pop out the chat for?
Because somebody might want to chat something.
No, but like, what else are you on the screen?
The
Word doc.
Word
Okay,
doc.
Got you.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll still getting ourselves organized here, so not to worry. Okay. Okay, at least no one's chatted yet.
People may not be on yet.
Yeah.
You remember how to half the screen so it's half Word doc, half chat?
I thought I had collapsed this down.
You clicked the button and it said we're not responding and then didn't do anything.
Never mind.
You remember the fast way to get it halved?
The fast way?
Yeah. Click and drag from the top of the screen, drag it to the side until it automatically sizes up for you. Not that top, the bar up here. Click and drag to the side, all the way. See this little, there you go. Now click on the chat, so it'll automatically size, so half the screen is the chat and the other half is the Word document, and then you can go back and forth and size it how you want.
I can make this shorter.
Ta-da!
So this can be a little bigger, because that's important for me. So you get a lot of this fine.
That's the 100%. You looking for the plus button?
Yeah. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, I was gonna say a little bit to your left.
I was looking for a little pad that changes color. Okay, that's better. I got a chance of reading this. And then
What are you trying to go for?
it's going to pull up I have to just open a whole new window. Never mind. Pull up the Bible Gateway.
Mm.
It's hard to see. The differentiation in the darkness is enough to where I just barely.
Do you need your screen brightness up?
Okay. We are on, but I think maybe everyone's given up on us. This doesn't notify us when somebody's on, does it?
Is there anybody on?
So far, no.
Did you announce that we were gonna have a thing?
Everybody knew.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, we never canceled.
Okay. You might have.
I didn't tell everybody to stay away until they hear from us. So.
Did I text some people?
Okay, so question: did you get bedrock for your makeup? Like cause Jackie said. Okay, I'm gonna go downstairs. Call me if you need me.
I took it up here.
Hi. Love you.
Love you, little
Scare
girl.
me
Ah. Well, shalom, Gail. Still have a 30-second delay, but at least we're up and running. So pretty soon you should be getting what we're doing. Let's see. Okay. Uh, but not okay. I'm on, but not very loud. Um, okay. When the girls get back up here, I'll see if we can adjust the volume a little bit. Otherwise, I'll just have to talk louder.
I got you. Microphone sensitivity coming up.
Okay. We have our tech maven over here to.
Hello, I have returned for this session.
Uh-oh.
How about now?
Hopefully, that's not too much. We'll see. Okay, we did turn the microphone up pretty much all the way. So let me know. We're like I said, we're on a 30-second delay. Haven't figured out how to fix that yet.
You can't fix this 30-second delay. It's part of the YouTube's streaming properties.
Then why is it other people? I've seen them do a live thing and they get a response within several seconds.
They're either using some kind of different program or they're paid for like an immediate thing.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so let us know how we're sounding. Actually, I can play a trick on you. Suddenly, start talking very quietly. All right. While you're waiting for that, can you see on the screen? You should have on your left hand our text screen, and on the right hand, sorry, text screen. Chat screen. That's
box.
A chat box. And on the right hand should be our text for the day, Galatians 1D. So if you see that, let me know. So we have the view properly done.
Okay, I'm gonna go back for food.
Okay. Okay. Oh, good. Much better. I was it's in the middle of typing. Started typing something and realized this is a funny system. I have to click on the line. It doesn't default back to the type line. I have to click on it before I can start typing something, and I'm just not used to it. Shalom Yafa. We're still on about a 30-second delay, but that's a whole lot better than what it was. I don't know if we're going to be able to fix that. But this is on a different OBS software. Jason had recommended this one as a better quality. So hopefully it's more stable, even though we don't necessarily get to talk a lot. You don't get to hear me a lot faster, but as long as what you're looking at and what you're hearing is still in sync, I'm good. We're on at 6. Kelly had asked for 6 o'clock because she's 2 hours behind us. Or 2 hours ahead of us, I should say. And it's hard for her to be up that late, I guess. So yeah, it's 6 o'clock, although I'm very slow getting started. Elisheva came over and straightened out the new one. Okay, thank you. Hopefully everyone that had a subscribe button or a reminder button got something when this went live, but okay. kind of nice to have this working again. Hopefully this doesn't fall apart like the previous software did. Because we started off this way, the first time or two, and then it just got slower and slower and harder to make it work. So, God willing, this will stay stable. Okay, actually, okay. I want to compare, what I'm saying versus what I'm typing. Hopefully the typing comes up right away, even if there's a 30-second delay on the voice. We'll have something reasonably instantaneous. Also, I know we set up for the camera to have my smiling face on. Are you seeing that at all? Oh, this is taking longer. Okay. All right. Well, okay. We also went back over our list of videos that we have available on YouTube. We cleaned out the ones that were the false starts and the this last Sabbath thing where 3 hours of waiting for things to not happen. So and so we cleaned a lot of that out, and still trying to decide how we're going to do the Sabbath service. On one hand, I want to have the prayer service and some semblance of a Devar and Torah service in the middle of it. But given the difficulties we've had, I'm almost ready to work on one good prayer service and have it available for people to watch at their leisure, and then we can just simply go straight to instead of doing the prayer service every week. I think I mentioned this last time, didn't I? Some people some people want to do the prayer service every week rather than just pulling up an old video that repeats the same thing over and over. No, kind of think of it, I think we ended up deciding, oh, okay. Shalom, Tara. How you doing? Yeah, we're back and running again. The bad side is we're still at a 30-second delay between the voice, me speaking, and you hearing. But that's a whole lot better than what it was before. And so far we haven't. That's why nobody's mentioned any hang-ups or freezes. and that's good. So hopefully we're using a different software um, behind the running the YouTube input. So that's okay. Thank you, Yafa, setting up the link. Do you have to add a new link every time we start? Of course, if you put it on Facebook, once you enter that, you pretty much notify everybody who is receiving our Facebook. So I guess it's a good thing we do it every time. But is there a single individual link, or is it new for each session? One single link that connects all the time, or is it a new link for each session? This is it's kind of funny in that since I'm not not seeing you all physically face to face, it's if you're not chatting back, it's almost like I've got a room full of people who have their arms folded in front of them and they're just staring at me. So that's what I got. That's what I'm working with. Okay. Okay. So it would be more helpful then if we actually got the session started live a few minutes early so you can get the link up to Facebook in a more timely manner. Is that correct? Eventually what we're going to do, we just started doing it today. I mentioned that there's a nice long front end on this where we're chatting and just trying to get connected, making sure everything's working before the study actually starts. And we're going back and trimming off that beginning section because it's just me talking. So, and there's no reason for that, just chatting. So what we do is we're going back to chop off that first bit, and then so when you touch on the link to the video as it's stored on YouTube, excuse me, it'll start pretty close to the actual study. Okay, it's just about 6:30. So let's go ahead and pretty much get started. Actually, I don't know if we want to wait another minute or so, but
we can get going.
Okay. Just FYI, this has been on about a half an hour before we actually start the study.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll give you an idea about where to Okay. So shalom, y'all. This is our continuing study in the book of Galatians. Actually, we're going to finish chapter 1 today. And what I wanted to do, let's see if I can get this up here. Oops. There we go. All right, let's take a little running start in our our look at this. I want to go back to verse 6 in chapter 1, and then we'll pick up in our final section for the chapter. I marvel that you are turning away so soon from him who called you in the grace of Christ to a different gospel, which is not another, but there are some who trouble you and want you to pervert the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel to you than what we have preached to you, let him be accursed. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone preaches any other gospel to you than what you have received, let him be accursed. For do I now persuade men or God, or do I seek to please men? For if I still pleased men, I would not be a bondservant of Christ. Verse 11, but I make known to you, brethren, that the gospel which was preached to me was not according to man. For I neither received it from man, nor was I taught it, but it came through the revelation of Jesus Christ. This is King James, New King James translation. For you have heard of my former conduct in Judaism, how I persecuted the church of God beyond measure and tried to destroy it. And I advanced in Judaism beyond many of my contemporaries in my own nation, being more exceedingly jealous for the traditions of my fathers. And now we're into our text for the day. But when it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb, and called me through his grace to reveal his Son in me, that I might preach him among the Gentiles, I did not immediately confer with flesh and blood, nor did I go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before me, but I went to Arabia and returned again to Damascus. Then after 3 years I went up to Jerusalem to see Peter and remained with him 15 days. But I saw none of the other apostles except James, the Lord's brother. Now concerning the things which I write to you, indeed before God I do not lie. Afterward I went into the regions of Syria and Cilicia, and I was unknown by face to the churches of Judea which were in Christ, but they were hearing only, he who formerly persecuted us now preaches the faith which he once tried to destroy, and they glorified God in me. Okay. Oh, shalom, Kelly. Glad you made it. So, Galatians chapter 1, on verse 15, and we will complete this section today, this chapter today. But when it pleased God, who separated me from my mother's womb and called me through his grace. Okay. Separated me from my mother's womb, Shaul acknowledges that it was God's plan for Shaul to work for him well ahead of Shaul's understanding the calling. See Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah 1:5, and also Yeshayahu, Isaiah 49:1. And he called me. We know this from Acts chapter 9, verse 4, where Yeshua speaks to him from the heavenly abode and says, I got some stuff for you to do. Okay. And through his grace. By acknowledging his calling was before any of his own acts or deeds, the only reason for having the calling was God's grace. Whoa. Did I somehow... Okay, I'm going to have to fix my own notes here. Thought I had something there. Okay, remember we're doing it, as we're looking through all the times the word grace pops up, we're trying to determine if the actual understanding of grace should be unmerited favor or merited favor. In other words, God is gracious to us because we obey him. Okay, and in this case, if you're ever going to have an argument that grace would be unmerited favor, this would be an argument for this, because most of the time we see that God has provided his acceptance and pleasure in us by our obedience. Here, Shaul acknowledges that he was working very hard to harm the congregations of God who embraced Messiah Yeshua. But it was God who overlooked that when it came to calling him to go and preach the good news of Messiah to the Gentiles. So I would say that's a pretty gracious as an unmerited favor. Shaul did nothing to earn that accolade, except maybe because of his zealousness and his detail. He became basically the right person to go talk to the Gentiles. And how that works, and I always thought, for the longest time, I was asking God, why would, why? It seemed to me it was kind of backwards, because, growing up in evangelical churches and stuff, I was used to just, plain bold preaching, not a lot of detail, but just plain bold preaching. So I'm thinking, well, we're reaching out basically to the masses with straightforward preaching. I would think you don't need a whole lot of theology for that, but why would God call Shaul, who was according to his own words, pretty much the top theologian of people of his age? And so that didn't make sense to me. Why would somebody who is more of a firebrand and a true preacher like Peter, who had no trouble standing before the Sanhedrin saying, but this Messiah whom you have persecuted is indeed this Yeshua is indeed the Messiah. Didn't need any other theological explanation beyond that. And you would think, if he's dealing with the Sanhedrin, he would be very technical and very intellectual. But as it turns out, with the intellectual elite, you kind of need to be a bludgeon. But with the people who have no basis of understanding who they are and what they need to do, you need someone, especially in the religious atmosphere that was then, and it's identical to what's going on today. You need somebody to walk you through, what's right and what's wrong with regards to religious activities. You have all kinds of people trying to tell you, if you want to be pleasing to God, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, and it's all by tradition, and you need to master the Shulchan Aruch, and get to do everything perfectly according to tradition, and that's how God's gonna be pleased with you. Well, it took Shaul, with the wisdom of knowing what is the right thing to do, to explain why. Rather than just being a yes, no argument, he's the one that can explain to you why this is not necessary. And he gets into that detail through the rest of this letter. And the short explanation is, you already belong to God. You have the Spirit in you. God is already doing miracles through you. What can becoming a Pharisee add to that? And the answer is nothing. And the book is basically that statement. You don't need to be a Pharisee to properly belong to God and be in his family. And the modern application of that is, you don't need to be Orthodox to please God and to belong to him. Now, the Orthodox advertise themselves, as did the Pharisees at that day, as, oh, no, you can't really be whole before God. You really can't make him happy. You really can't be one of us unless you make the conversion. And the final act of that conversion is a circumcision. This is why the circumcision becomes the picture or the token of the whole argument. So, having said all that, okay, I'll have to fix 15 there, find out why part of that is there and part of that's missing. Okay, verse 16. To reveal his Son in me, that I might preach him among the Gentiles, I do not immediately confer with flesh and blood. And again, this is back in chapter of Acts, chapter of Acts. Sounds like a music group, second chapter of Acts. Book of Acts 9:5, which is immediately after Yeshua calling him to serve Yeshua. and following negla is an Aramaic phrase which can mean manifest, as in revealing through a visual process. This is a common wordplay Paul uses, emphasizing that Messiah was revealed through his manifestation in the flesh. And so, amongst all the other philosophies of the day, excuse me, there was the philosophy that Yeshua did not arrive physically, but rather just appeared in spirit. And so the whole concept of being made manifest, or negla in the Aramaic, is to indicate that this was a real, true physical thing. It wasn't a specter or a ghost walking around, but rather a real living human being. Okay, that I might preach him among the Gentiles. Okay, did I miss something here? Oh yeah, the Greek there in Greek means in. And the reason I bring that in, some translations, I think, translate to reveal his son to me, but reveal it to me is the presentation of Messiah, but to reveal his son in me means that Paul is living out his calling. Okay, and that's a difference in understanding what he's trying to get at. And remember, this whole chapter is essentially establishing why he's doing what he's doing, under whose authority, and what are the circumstances. Okay, that I might preach him among the Gentiles. Again, back in Acts 9, Shaul's calling was to go to the Gentiles, but this was not exclusive of Jews. In every city, Shaul would always go first to the local synagogue and preach Messiah to the Jews. From there, he would branch out to the Gentiles, and we have plenty of circumstances referenced there. Just in case, I have to try to remember. There's not an easy way. You can always ask a question, type in a question, and I'll get to it if I can remember to look and to read it. But we're mentioning Shaul. Paul, of course, is the Greek English name that we're used to using. And because it's in the King James Bible, it's got to be true. But his actual name in Hebrew is Shaul. And his Hebrew name is not identical to his Gentile name. Paul is a Gentile name, and it means something different. Shaul means asked or requested. Okay, the word in Hebrew for a question is she'elah. Okay, and so Shaul is asking, so, or questioning. If we were to put a little more American angle on that. Okay, so I'd have to remember that to explain that as much as I can. Okay, thank you, Yafal. I'll try to remember to get started maybe, 5 minutes before the start time, 10 minutes before, something like that. That way it's on and we're running. Okay. Let's see. Okay, let me finish his idea here. I did not immediately confer with flesh and blood. Okay, harkens back to verses 11 and 12. Basically, he didn't go talk to people right away. And now I can understand this, from for Shaul to suddenly show up back in Jerusalem going, I was sent out to go catch these messianics, but now I've met with Messiah, and going back to his old folks and saying, I've met Messiah on the road. Now I have no idea what I'm going to be doing. He probably would have gotten chewed up quite a lot and not had a good chance to really understand. So Shaul, no doubt, had much restructuring to do in his theology. No kidding. Like somebody Oh, this is why I don't get part of it. Okay, I need to... I'll fix it later. I need to move the text over. Like somebody who needs to concentrate gets away from distractions. Shaul turns away from voices and influences so he could focus on finding out for himself what the real truth is. Okay, that's pretty obvious. I think that's a smart thing to do. The interesting thing is, and this is a sort of a two-house theory thing, that the lost sheep of the house of Israel among the Gentiles doesn't really fly. Rather, these are God's people whom he's calling home. Yeah, in that sense it's true, but it's not a Jew versus Gentile arrangement. Remember what Torah says. If anybody of the nations wants to come and join, okay, they are to follow the commandments of God, and they are to be treated as if they were native born. There's no other designation, and in fact they are absorbed into Israel. They don't have a forever designation of forever being Gentile. They're considered part of Israel once they come and join and walk in the ways of God. So in a way that the statement's partially correct, but it's not that two-house kind of a doctrine where you have Israel and you have Judah, and never the twain shall meet, which is sort of the result of that doctrine, trying to always keep people separate. Sometime soon in our reading, I think we're going to run into Ezekiel 37. Okay, 37? Yeah. And that's where you have that vision of the two sticks. This is the whole house of Israel, house of Judah thing. And the difficulty with the doctrine of this two-house thing is that it works to forever separate the two groups of people, but the prophecy of the time and the explanation is that the two will be one. And so any doctrine or discussion that separates the two is not the intent of that vision, not the intent of that instruction. And this is the only place you have this kind of a statement of taking Judah and Israel and binding them together to be one. It's going to be, under one king, basically under one government. And when everybody came back, all those that came back from captivity came back, there was no longer a separation of Judah and Israel, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. It was all one people. So in that sense, it was a near future prophecy of how things are going to be politically when the return happens. Okay, so sorry that's a long explanation, but we've had a few difficulties and issues with that doctrine in the past, but it's kind of a settled thing for us now. Okay, so Shaul did not immediately confer with flesh and blood. Next paragraph. In rabbinic, good. My tongue is slipping. In rabbinic terms, Paul is asserting that, with respect to his gospel to the Gentiles, he interpreted his own teacher's dictum. Rabban Gamliel said, "Appoint a teacher for thyself and avoid doubt." Not in reference to a human guide, but with respect to a directly divine source. So Shaul spent three years studying on his own. And I can imagine that would have been kind of necessary, because he would have been very fully versed in the traditions. When he was very well versed in the traditions and the oral Torah, which are those traditions, was preached to be and taught to be equal in value as God's written Torah. So we're he's got some undoing to do in that learning. And so he spent 3 years away getting his stuff together. Okay. After Paul's unique conversion experience, meaning his views concerning Pharisaic and rabbinic law have changed, he took off on a trek to Arabia. Why Arabia? It is obvious to this writer, and this is commentary by Dr. Stern, I believe, that he traveled to the location of Mount Sinai like Elijah, perhaps out of desperation, in the same way that Elijah was desperate. Like Elijah, Paul was probably looking for some answers to his many questions, considering that he had grown up in the shadow of some of Judaism's most influential teachers of the day, including Hillel's grandson, Gamliel I. What was he supposed to do now? Okay, so Gamliel I is very highly quoted in the Mishnah and in the Talmud. Much of what he taught is recorded for us, and so he was, he learned from this. Okay, in English it's Gamaliel, in King's English, but in Hebrew it's Gamliel, which means also to me, God. So he grew up, one of the guys who provided material very heavily for the Mishnah and the Talmud, Paul learned from directly. So, he's got a little unlearning to do, relearning to do. So he's got to sit there and spend some time arguing, yelling, arguing with himself, arguing with God. And it's safer to do that when you're away from everybody else, okay? Arabia was mostly outside of Roman influence, and thus safer for Jews to practice the commandments. Remember, Rome was sometimes permissive and sometimes not when it came to Judaism. So by the time you get to the Islamic takeover of the region, there's actually very large communities of Jews living down in the Arabian Peninsula. And so it wouldn't have been unusual for Jews to be living throughout the peninsula. And okay. Actually, I just commented on most of what I had written here. Arabia was mostly outside of Roman influence and thus safer for Jews to practice the commandments. By the time of the rise of Islam, there was a large Jewish presence in the Arabian Peninsula. Shaul did eventually go to Jerusalem, but Acts does not detail the Arabian part of the trip. And I added a small map here to look at. And you can see Israel or Judea on the far southeastern side of the Mediterranean Sea. That little mark there is Israel. And Arabia, within Arabia, Paul talks about Mount Sinai of Arabia, and it's interesting that he would specify that. Now, where the traditional site is in the Sinai Peninsula, which is directly south of Israel, and it's part of a mountain chain in that southern part. The Sinai where am I? Okay. The Sinai of Arabia is a little bit east. It's east of the Red Sea, not hugely far away from what we normally call Mount Sinai. And the interesting thing is, and this pops up as some people argue this occasionally back and forth a bit, that the one in the south in the Sinai Peninsula really isn't the right place. And there's arguments in favor of that. And the one that's in Arabia is actually seems to be more in line with the story. Remember that the children of Israel crossed the Red Sea on foot, which would mean that somewhere in that Gulf, which makes up the Red Sea, was made dry land. Everyone crossed, and then they continued east and maybe a little south to get to where the Arabian version of Sinai is. So to me, that kind of makes sense, but because it's not a commonly accepted geological or historical fact, it's one of those things that it's an interesting idea. We'll find out for sure at one time or another. Science is always catching up to God, so I'm not worried, about one version or the other. Okay, back to our commentary, and I think this one's Dr. Stern again. Shaul must have seen at once that the Pharisaic Judaism, which he had learned from Rabban Gamliel, okay, this is the Hebrew version, had been shaken by the coming of Yeshua the Messiah. But it must have taken him considerable time to think about the various specific issues, the nature of atonement and forgiveness, the authority of the written and oral Torah, the meaning of the messianic prophecies, the role and future of the Jewish people, the preeminent requirement of trust for salvation, the role of ethics and other essential theological matters, and to formulate and refine his views to what they were when he wrote his letters. As soon as he experienced God's call to be an emissary to the Gentiles, he must have realized that his need was not to be instructed in the Gospels as it had been preached to the Jews, but to think and meditate privately on its implications for Gentiles. No one could guide him in this, for he would be pioneering. But his training as a Jewish scholar by Gamliel uniquely equipped him to investigate these matters in a fundamental way. And this is why he was just the right guy at the right time to go to the Gentiles. He knew enough of oral Torah. He knew enough of the oral discussions that he'd be able to differentiate what is God-breathed commandment and what is man-made tradition. Now, we need to understand that as people who walk in Messianic Judaism, we also acknowledge and recognize that not all tradition is bad and evil. We are not talking about a completely non-Jewish tradition of how we live our lives according to the Bible. There's a lot of tradition that's useful and helpful, okay? But there are some that aren't, and we need to know well enough to know the difference, and that's a lot of what I try to teach. To teach the difference between tradition and Scripture, and whether or not that tradition can be useful or is not relevant or helpful to a walking in faith with God and obeying what He says to do, so we don't get caught up chasing too heavily after man-made traditions to where the traditions start to take over preeminence with God's given commandments. Okay. Then verse 18, very simple factual statement. Then after 3 years I went to Jerusalem to see Peter and remained with him 15 days. Okay. Again, he's writing to a Gentile audience, so he didn't say a couple of Shabbats. He didn't stay for a couple of Shabbats, but 15 days. Okay. In this section, Acts 9:26-30 says, some details may appear different, but this is more the choice of chronicler than any flaw in Scripture, and this is important to understand. Just because there's a difference doesn't mean one is right and one is wrong. I spent a lot of years doing insurance claims, and it is not at all uncommon for people who have seen the same accident relate different details. It's incredibly amazing. Even something as simple as somebody running a red light, you don't always have everybody agreeing as to who had the green light and who had the red light. And you have some differences in details also. If an accident happened at night, the color on the car can sometimes appear different than what it was really there. And sometimes just in the haste of the moment, you make a mental image of what you think you saw, and then you don't get around to upgrading that quick mental image with the facts that you're looking at now that you've had a chance to look at it. So it's not uncommon. And sometimes it's not even a matter of getting the facts different. It's sometimes just different focus on what are the important facts. Okay. In Acts chapter 9, the details are a little different, but does it mean that they are both, that one is inaccurate? No. It means that one has different details. And you can do the same thing. You can have somebody say, I went to the supermarket today, and then somebody else can say, yeah, we went to the supermarket. I made sure I had my mask on. Well, now you have two different stories. Does that mean one's right and one's wrong? No, it's just different details. Okay, and so understand that. Okay. Okay. Now I had mentioned this earlier. Why Kepha? Why Peter? And part of it is Yeshua appointed Kepha saying he had the keys to the kingdom. So basically, he was the introducer of the new phases of the rollout of God's kingdom. He was the one that preached at on Shavuot, okay, Chag Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, okay, Pentecost in English, okay. He was the one who basically introduced in an open, powerful way that all of Israel is now called to embrace Yeshua as Messiah. In Acts 2, Acts 8, actually, you have the Samaritans. You have the Samaritans who, where Kepha introduced to the Samaritans, which is the order that God said, where Yeshua said, you're going to go to Israel, you're going to go to Samaria, then you go to the uttermost part. And then, so Peter was the one who introduced. Shalom Thal, how you doing? Peter's the one who introduced. Sorry, what's that? Tau. That's what I said, Tau. Sorry about that. Peter's the one who introduced Yeshua to the Samaritans in the formal sense. Other people have talked to them before, but Peter's the one who did the formal introduction. And then to Gentiles in general in chapter 10. Okay. And so this is why he went to speak to. So since Peter had the keys, it would be smart to go and talk to Peter once you have a clear idea of what you're doing. And so, he spent 15 days with them. Obviously, they spent 15 days of talking, praying, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, arguing. It could be that Peter might have been hanging on to traditions he didn't need to hang on to, and Shaul had to talk to him about that, or Kepha was filling in some of this is how we've done things, and this is how it makes sense, and then Shaul goes, oh yeah, that does make sense. Okay, they had 2 weeks of hashing out whatever similarities and differences they had. But the bottom line is, when it was over, the congregation and the leadership of the congregation in Jerusalem extended the right hand of fellowship and acknowledged Shaul's calling to preach the good news to the Gentiles. Okay. And that we have to understand. So it's not that Shaul never spoke to Jews. Remember, that was his style. And I was going to mention that, and then I forgot to mention it. Why did Paul go first to the synagogue? Okay, the answer is pretty simple, and it's basically what you call in the military a force multiplier. He can go out and preach the good news to the Gentiles, but if you go to the synagogue and you can get 10, 20, 30, 50 people to also go and preach this good news to the Gentiles, you're going to get the infiltration into the whole city a whole lot faster than Shaul doing it by himself. Okay? There are circumstances where things might have been a little different. Shaul, in writing to the Galatians, kind of gives you the impression that he was pretty much the only guy talking about Messiah, Yeshua, to the Gentiles. And so you kind of get that impression. But as a general rule, Shaul would not have to be working alone in preaching the good news to the Gentiles. He would be bringing with him other people, or he would be teaching people in the synagogues and bringing them to reach out to the Gentiles. Okay? So, verse 19, but I saw none of the other apostles except James, the Lord's brother. So why Yaakov? That's James. He was the head of the community and or the Bet Din for Yerushalayim and thus all believers. Now, the Bet Din is the house of judgment. This was the congregation's functional court for basically civil court. The Bet Din would handle minor infractions and crimes, would deal out punishment. They would also be the ones to authorize the writing of a get, a bill of divorcement, and seeing that is done. If there was a dispute between members of the congregation, the Bet Din would act as court to hear the case and judge as to who would be, whose story to accept or reject. And it was usually made of a panel of 3 judges. This was not a standing court that was active all the time. It was only called for the specific circumstances when a Bet Din was necessary. Bet Din, by the way, means house of judgment. And so either Yaakov was the head of the congregation, and that appears to be the case, but we don't have an absolute plain statement of that. Or he could have been the head of the Bet Din, who maybe they're the ones that questioned Shaul when he got to Jerusalem, because everybody, all the believers in Jerusalem would have wanted to find out for sure what's going on. So it would kind of make sense that Shaul would present himself before the Bet Din for questioning, to find out if he was truly a proper believer. Okay. 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 Now the apostles. Okay. The other apostles. The Greek, of course, is apostolon, or apostles. We have our English is very much just a transliteration of the Greek word. The Hebrew word is hashlichim, and that comes from the root word is the shaliach. No, that's actually the noun for somebody who was sent. It means shlach. There we go. That's the shalach is the root word, and it means to send or to send out. And so the apostle was somebody who was sent out. The translation used commonly in the Complete Jewish Bible, Dr. Stern's translation, is emissaries. He didn't like to use the word apostle because people got, especially in modern times, got really freaky about the word apostle. And you have people developing doctrines that say only the original 12 can be called apostles and nobody else. Well, the problem with that is that doesn't function. Okay, I can understand that you had an original 12, and they do have a special place, but to say that only that word apostle could ever be used for only the original 12 is not functional, because even being sent out, if you ever see the phrase "sent out" anywhere in the New Testament, that's the Greek word apostolon. Okay. So depending on the gender and text and excuse me and stuff, it might be apostolos. So you might have some people say it's apostolos, and that's okay. It's the same root word. Okay. But it's somebody who's sent out. And to understand this in context, the word being to be sent out is very broad, and it's basically anybody who's sent on a task for somebody else to do something or to say something. So if I asked my daughter to go to the supermarket and
I'd say no.
such good help. Okay. If I sent her out, and asked her to go and buy something at the store for me, while she's doing that duty, she is an apostle for me. I have sent her out on a duty to do something. Okay. And you can tell by her willingness, you can see that she would be very good at doing that. In reality, she'd be very happy to. But the idea is it's very broad. In fact, the same root word, the same understanding can be used by anybody who's sent to represent something or to do something. Thus, all of our elected officials are apostles for us. Now, whether or not they truly represent us is a different issue. That's a political answer. But as far as the task of being sent by us to represent us in whatever assembly they're being sent to, that word apostle would apply. Insurance agents are apostles. Anybody who is selling something for a company or doing something for a company is an apostle. The guy who does the service work on your air conditioner, he's an apostle. He's sent by the company to do work on your house. He's sent on a task. Okay, and he represents the company with everything he says and does. An insurance agent, any kind of a financial fiduciary kind of thing, the same idea. They are apostles. They are authorized by a company to sell their insurance, and they are under strict requirements to only do what they're told to do, not to do less and not to do more. And there's some very strict penalties if you exceed or fail to do all that you are instructed to do. And so this is the idea of what the apostle is. So it's a much more generic and broad word. And the reason I'm going through a long description on this is I just want to make sure that we can desensitize on that word, because it's a much broader word than just those original 12. And it's used all the time in much broader context than just those initial 12. Okay. So as I'm wrapping this up, I know there's about a 30-second delay. So if you have any questions, comments, or rebukes, please type them in now, and we'll get going. Let me do a quick check on what's... let's see. Yes, Linda, so nice to be back in shul. This would be so much easier. I do like the idea of doing this on Wednesdays for a Bible study online. However, if we get the chance to meet in person, I would much rather do the prayer service and the discussion, and especially the nosh all together. Okay, so yeah, I agree. And God willing, we may be just a short time to getting a chance to get back together. Speaking of which, Gail, as soon as we do get the word that it's okay for us to meet, please get to the city and see if we can get our hands on one of the shelters at the park for Shavuot. Okay? If you can do that, that'd be great. Okay. Yeah, Kelly would be, and also Kelly, we're talking about how, since now that we have this going and the technology is a little bit more functional for us, we are going to work on getting this our regular Shabbat meeting televised as well, so you can join in. Okay. Um, so yeah, in the long run, I think we're going to end up doing both. Okay. It's okay, Kelly. Yeah, I'm not one of the original 12, so I'm kosher with that. I'm all right. Okay. Any other questions, comments, rebukes? While I'm waiting for anybody to type in something again, let me do the YouTube thing and remind everybody to subscribe if you haven't already. Subscribe, like, so we get positive responses and on our, because I haven't even looked at those to see what our rating is, if anybody even doesn't like us. And also there's a bell there for notification. It should be, at least my understanding, is you'll get some sort of a text notifying you that this goes live when it goes live. I think that's how it goes. So anyways, and if I can remember, Yafa, I'll get us started 5-10 minutes early, so you have time to post the link on Facebook, and we'll go from there. Okay. Okay. So Kelly says, I just need to iterate this because she says, "Yay!" I think she's saying that because we're ready to close the meeting. No, I know that. No better. Yeah, I really want to keep you, and there are other people who like to find us online because they can't physically come to a meeting, and I'd really want to make sure that we have it to work for everybody. That's right, second Passover. Thank you for reminding me. Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, is tomorrow at sunset. If you missed celebrating Passover last month, okay, tomorrow is your makeup test. Your makeup date. Okay, so get yourself some unleavened bread and be careful to not eat anything. At least that night, if not the whole 24 hours starting tomorrow at sunset. So, you guys are having way too much fun over there. Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments, rebukes? Okay, you guys are being much too polite. That's okay. Well, God willing, when we get the chance to be face to face, the communication is a lot easier. This will be good. Okay. Now, it was our understanding that there's about a 30-second delay from the time I speak and the time you guys hear it. I don't know how we can tell whether or not that's the case. Well, Elisheva timed it earlier. I just want to make sure if that hasn't degraded at all until we have a different time. So that's still annoying, but it's not as bad as it was last week. So this is an improvement to where it was, and as long as we can keep this as a norm, it'll be okay. Okay. All right. Okay, Gail's recommending. We can meet on Shabbat. If we get arrested, at least we will be in good company. Yeah, considering that the most courts amongst the states where people are doing this kind of thing, the courts are throwing out the arrests. The courts are taking these rules as being unconstitutional. They can be guidelines, but they can't be laws. They are not laws enacted by a legislature. These are executive orders, which are not arrestable offenses. So, yeah, we probably could. I just don't want to invite everybody to have problems and issues. just because we want to meet. Oh yeah, and tonight's the 26th of the Counting the Omer. Just about. Yeah. Okay, just a few more minutes. Okay. Oh, Kelly says share the joke.
Nope.
They find all sorts of crazy things as being funny, and not always it's something that's intelligent or useful. So I will forego embarrassing my daughters by trying to make them.
We can embarrass ourselves enough. Thank you very much.
Yes. So we'll do that. Okay. Any other questions, comments, rebukes? If not, we'll start to close this down. Just out of the abundance of caution, I'm going to basically stop here, but I won't shut off the live chat for about another 30 seconds. And that way, just in case, cutting it off before you guys get to hear it and see it all doesn't occur. I've been told that doesn't happen, but I want to be sure. So I'm going to quiet down from here. So shalom. Have a good rest of the week. Have a good Sabbath, and we'll meet again 11 o'clock on Shabbat right here on this channel. Yeah, I can say that now. Right here on this channel, and we will continue with our weekly prayer service. Okay, so we'll hang loose for about 30 seconds and then shut off. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh. Okay.
Are we done now?
Oh,
Can
my
I stop?
cheeks hurt.
Can I stop smiling? Oh, my cheeks hurt. Oh.
Careful, I don't want to get your
That was
inhaler.
good. That was a good impression. you did the stick hands too.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Can I go now? All right. Okay. Although I got to get that